Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the Booker Prize shortlist for 2021. So, if you don't know, the Booker Prize is one of the sort of highest, highest regarded prizes for literature. It's been done every year. They pick a shortlist of sort of 12 books, sort of at the end of the summer, and then in, I think it's either September or October, they narrow it down to their 6-book shortlist, and then in the beginning of November they pick their winner. And originally I wanted to do this video and guess what the winner was going to be, what I thought the winner should have been, but sort of the timing of things didn't really work out like that. So this is just my opinion on the shortlist. And whether or not I agree or disagree with the way that it came out. Before we get into this video, let me just say that I am trying to reach 50 subscribers by the end of this year. I'm currently at 36. It's currently Tuesday. Hoping it is on Friday, so by midnight on Friday I would love to be at 50 subscribers. So if you want to hit that subscribe button and do me a massive favour, thank you so much. Now, onto the video. Okay, so as I said, there are 6 books on the shortlist. Unfortunately, at the moment, although I own copies of all 6 of them, I lent out my 2 favourites to friends to read. So I only actually have 4 here, but because this is sort of the end of the year, I figured I'd do it now. Still make this video anyway. So the books on the shortlist this year were Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, Bewilderment by Richard Powers, Passage North by Anuka Rupragazam, No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, The Fortune Men by Nadafa Mohammed, and The Promise by Damon Galga. I hope I'm saying that right. I see why they were all nominated. I'm just going to talk about them one by one in the order that I read them, and yeah, and then at the end I will give my opinion on which one should have won. So the first book that we're going to talk about is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. So I don't actually have a copy of this. This is one of the ones that I lent out. It's very thick, it's 600 pages. I thought I'd start with the biggest. Basically it tells the story of, it kind of starts in the modern day with an actress who's kind of fallen out of grace in Hollywood, and she decides to try and take her, as part of her redemption, she decides to take on a biopic about this woman Marion, who in the 50s, I think it's the 50s, flew around the world. She wants to fly around the world and do a great circle, and just before she finishes, she disappears, and her and her navigator are never heard of him again. So it kind of tells you Marion's story from before her birth up until her death. And this is going to be a spoiler-free video, so I don't want to say too much, but it was one of the most beautiful books I have ever read. It's slow to start. It took me a while to get into it. The chapters are very long. It doesn't just tell Marion's story, it also tells the story of like her brother James, her twin brother, and their friend, if I remember correctly, his name is Caleb, I think. At the same time, it tells the story of this girl in 2014 who is doing research on her. But yeah, so this book is really gritty, it's really down to earth, it's very kind of detail oriented. It takes you through Marion's entire life, the good and the bad. It's about having an adventure inside you and just having your only desire be to fill this hole in your soul, and it was just absolutely incredible, and I think it changed me as a person probably. But I honestly thought I wasn't that engaged with it up until sort of the last sort of couple of chapters, 15-20 pages maybe, and then I sat up till 3 AM finishing it, and about the 3 I was like, oh, I need to finish this today. But it's beautiful. It's I highly recommend it. It was a 5-star read, honestly. It was just absolutely incredible, and I thought I'd hit it out quite good. Thought I'd started off quite strong. Thought, well, if they're all going to be like this, it'll be fine. So next I read The Fortune Men, which is this one. So The Fortune Men was kind of lukewarm for me. I think I gave it 3 stars in the end. It had really strong characters, but the chapters are quite long. I'm not keen on books that have long chapters, but that's, you know, it's not it's not a fault with the book itself. It's my own personal opinion. So the basic summary of this book is that our main character is Mahmoud. He is kind of down on his luck in Cardiff in the 50s, and he sort of engages in, like, I guess you'd class it as petty theft, and he always kind of makes up for it in the end, but he gets to the point where the police know his name so well, and when a shopkeeper is murdered in her own shop, he's accused of the murder, and it chronicles kind of his trial and everything. And it chronicles his trial. Yeah, it takes you through Mahmoud's, like, prison stay, and then I think I enjoyed it more sort of like the second half. I think the second half was a lot quicker paced. I think the problem with this one was the introductions of the characters was very kind of stilted. This is Nadifa Mohammed's debut novel, and I think you can tell that in certain places. Like her dialogue, I like dialogue, but like I like good dialogue, and her dialogue in a couple of places was didn't feel entirely natural. And that's out with sort of the use of accents and stuff, because her accents were incredible, but there were some points where most characters had one or two moments where they were a bit stilted and their dialogue didn't feel real. And if you do read this book, I would highly recommend that once you finish it, you read the author's note at the end, because that's what absolutely changed this for me, and that's what kind of made me sit there and go, wow. I stayed up too late to finish this one as well. That was mostly because I wanted to finish it, as opposed to being incredibly keen on seeing what happened. That I just kind of want to finish it. That one was a 3-star for me. It was kind of middle of the road. This next one ended up actually being incredible. So this one is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. So Patricia Lockwood, I believe, is a poet, and this is her debut fiction novel. And I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was also shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It's definitely a novel for the time, so it's set sort of modern day. It's written in I'll show you guys. It's written in kind of tweet-sized bites, and each sort of section is about something completely different. It's about an influencer. Nobody has any names in this, by the way, which is a little bit disorienting, but it doesn't really, it's told in such short snippets that it doesn't really matter. It's about an influencer who goes viral for a tweet and kind of continually tries to stay relevant until something happens and she gets called back home to deal with family issues, and that changes her entire perspective on life. It takes place over a really short period of time. You kind of have the first part, which seems timeless, seems kind of infinite, I guess, and then you have the second part, which takes place, I think it's a little bit over 6 months, that second part covers. So it is quite, but because it's told in short little snippets, it's really easy to read. It's really upsetting towards the end. It is based on a true story, if you read the author's note, but I'm surprised at how much I cared for the kind of really vapid, shallow protagonist of this novel, and I think not giving them a name makes it really, I guess, kind of what's the word, all-encompassing. You can apply it to anything, but I just thought it was a really quite incredible novel to read. The next one, A Passage North, I felt kind of the same about The Fortune Men with this. It's philosophical, and I've never really read a philosophical novel before, so I didn't know what to expect going into this. So our main character, Christian, I think is how you pronounce his name, he lives in Sri Lanka. Cannot remember anything. So he lives in Sri Lanka, and it's about kind of the I guess civil war that was going on there. It's set modern day, it is very modern. It's about him travelling to a village in the north of the country so he can attend the funeral of the woman who cared for his grandmother. And it addresses topics like mental health, death, grief, relationships, loss, spirituality. It is quite heavy going. It took me a while to read. It was a little bit slow. It is incredibly relatable to read it once you get past the kind of meandering storytelling. The story itself covers maybe a couple of days, I think, at most. But it's all the sort of passages and experiences and thoughts that Christian has on the entire way through, which makes it worth it. That was a sort of 3-star for me, a kind of middle of the road, and I thought that I definitely started off with the best of the best. I was a bit disappointed with the rest of them so far, until I got to Bewilderment. So Richard Powers wrote one of my other favourite books, which is The Overstory, which is about trees. I also don't have a copy of this one, I gave it away. Bewilderment I think is set in kind of the near future, I suppose, and it is very much based on what would have happened if Trump had won another term as president of the US. And I mean, like, there are things happening now that are mentioned in the book and are incredibly relevant to the book, and it was one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and I should have known that going into it, because The Overstory was absolutely incredible, and I love The Overstory. But Bewilderment is about a man who he's raising his son alone after the death of his wife. It's a very intimate portrayal of our universe and relations. This main character, can't remember his name, and I don't have the book to reference it. It's told in first person, so you never kind of, it is very intimate and it is very in depth. He's trying to raise his son Robin, and Robin is, I don't want to say not a normal child. He recognises that he's not a normal child. He struggles with things, but our protagonist doesn't want to give him a diagnosis. Our protagonist doesn't want to put him on drugs, despite what everybody's telling him to do in the school, sort of threatening him to do that. He is a scientist. He's a, what's the name? Astrobiologist. He's an astrobiologist. He looks at sort of life on other planets and how you can extrapolate that from data that you get about their atmospheres, which is really cool. And considering I also come from a science background, it is very interesting to know that, and to read about something like that. But his son Robin is fascinated by nature and the world around him, and in order to kind of facilitate that and to help Robin cope, our protagonist takes him to I guess a colleague, a friend of his wife's. This friend is a researcher who works on neurological mapping. So it's to do with training people's brains to kind of modulate responses based on previous brain scans that they've had. And it turns out that our protagonist's wife was one of the brain scans that they can modulate, and Robin learns to modulate his mother's brain scans, and it's very intimate, it's very in-depth, it's very sweet and quite hopeful. Robin is very keen on going to like the government and protesting for the rights of animals and the rights of all kind of living things. Very bittersweet when you get to the end. It is one of the most kind of heartfelt novels I think I've ever read. I realised what was going on. As I'll explain in a minute, a lot of these novels play with form, and I kind of twigged as to what was going on sort of a couple of chapters towards the end, and at that point it became incredibly bittersweet. But the chapters are really short, they're a couple of pages long, if that. It's an incredibly beautiful portrayal, and I would recommend this book to anybody. I think this is going to make my top 13 list, to be honest. But yeah, this was definitely a 5-star read. The last book on the shortlist is The Promise by Damon Galgo. So Galgo. I need to look these things up before I start these videos. But I finished this a couple of days ago. It took me about a month to read. It was incredibly slow going. However, it is worth it in the end. It's written very strangely, which is why it took me a wee while to get into. But I'll get to that in a second. So this story covers the deaths of all the members of a white family living in South Africa, and it covers it kind of, I think, from like the 70s and 80s to sort of modern day. And most of the time it follows the youngest member of the family, whose name is Amor. So it starts with the death of her mother, and it goes all the way through, and each sort of section is linked by the death of someone else in her family, which is not a spoiler because it says that in the blurb. I mean, the actual story connecting them all is pretty simple. Amour's mother promised the house that their housekeeper is living in. The housekeeper is black and the family are white. And during this sort of time in South Africa, black people couldn't own property. Is what I got from this. I'm not sure if that's entirely. I think it is, but that's what I got from this. And her mother makes her father promise that upon her mother's death, after she's been ill for a while, that her husband will give this land to their housekeeper. And at the start, it's kind of prevented by laws in place at the time, but as it goes on, it becomes more of a discussion of kind of privilege and grief and kind of changing situations. Kind of becomes an exploration of like religion, taking advantage of people, sort of topics like that. The promise that Amour's mother made to the housekeeper is maintained through the entire way through this book, and that is basically the storyline that this follows. There's a lot of violence in it. It's always kind of skipped over. It never goes into too much detail. But as I said before, one of the reasons why I wasn't too keen on this book was because of the way it's written. So it's written in sort of third person, omniscient, I can't say that word. It's a omniscient third person narrator for the most part. There are parts where that changes and it becomes first person or second person, which was very strange. It's written in third person, but in past tense, but also in present tense at the same time, which is a bit strange. It has a lot of what would now be considered head hopping, what most people would consider head hopping even, but somehow it works. It takes a while to get used to. There's also no scene or chapter breaks. It is literally just from one paragraph. You can go from, I think at one point it goes from Amour to the ghost of her mother to the woman who is watching over her body in the morgue. So it is a bit jumpy. It does take some getting used to, but it is worth it. I give it 4 stars in the end. This is the one that won. This is the winner of the Booker Prize 2021. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Bewilderment and Great Circle are strong contenders, and I think one of them probably... I think Bewilderment should have won, to be perfectly honest. Great Circle is a close second. I think if I had to rank them, this would come... no one is talking about it would come third. This would come fourth. The Fortune Men would be fifth, and A Pastor's North would be sixth. That's my own personal ranking. There are a lot of similarities between them, so they all kind of play with form. As I said, the promise is kind of written in big long sections, jumping about with an inconsistent sort of tense and narrator. And then you have No One Is Talking About Us, written in short, snappy bites. Great Circle jumps between past and present, and it's written in kind of like a... It's structured like a diary, but it's not written as a diary, if that makes sense. And Bewilderment is, of course, written in the way that Bewilderment uses italics, and the way its chapters are laid out is quite novel. I think The Fortune Men and A Pastor's North are the only ones that really don't play with function like that, with form like that even. All of these novels cover things that are really pertinent and important to sort of to our daily lives now. So I completely understand why they were all nominated. I mean, I think they're all incredibly important books, and I think they will be important books in the future as well. It's so easy to pick a topic nowadays and write about it, and I think we should, and I think everything should be. I think we should write more and reflect more on our current situation, because only through literature do we develop empathy. That's not true, but it's close enough. Thanks for watching this video. As I mentioned before, I am trying to get to 50 subscribers by the end of the year, so midnight on Friday. Today is currently Tuesday. I think I'm at 36. It's 14 more to go, so please hit that subscribe button if you don't mind. You can go ahead and unsubscribe after Friday, that's fine. And if you like this video, please give it a wee thumbs up. But yeah, I'll link my socials down below. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye! Bye.